Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
What's happening tonight, fans? Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez with you here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Welcome aboard. Brian Murphy is out today. He's, everything's fine. Murph is good. I guess, I don't know, Eric, is he still recovering from having to watch UConn play football?
Well, it's emotional. It's the last silver conflict you get to see. So, it takes a little while to get over that, and then you've got baseball playoffs. I mean, it's an emotional week for him. It's a big time.
It's a big week in the Murphy household, no doubt about it. So, but he will be at the Cincinnati game on Friday, which we will be. Oh yeah,
that's true. He's traveling. Yes,
he is
on a short week.
He is traveling, and we'll be talking about that and plenty more here, including a huge weekend coming up for volleyball and men's soccer coming up.
Women's soccer.
Well.
Everybody's playing.
Women's soccer too. Everyone's got something big going on this week. Not to mention, but of course, the biggest of the big right now, which I know a lot of you here want us to preview, is UCF against Cincinnati in football on Friday night. So we've got a lot. We've got a lot that's ready to go here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. You can follow us at Black and Gold Banneret. We are SB Nation's home for your UCF Knights. And you can also hit us up on Twitter at UCF_Banneret as well. And Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret in addition to that. So lots to get to here. We also, by the way, we have a guest for this show. Mike Schneid, who is the site manager for Down the Drive, SB Nation's Cincinnati site, is joining us as well to answer some questions about the Bearcats coming in, who, by the way, we have found are not changing the look of their football field. That threw everybody, including myself, for a loop, because it came from the official account. I mean,
well, that's kind of material that goes flat.
That's a big huge self-own if you're Cincinnati Football, man. What in the world?
Well, apparently they were trying to sell the point that the field would be black because all the fans that were wearing black would be on the field after the game. See, that's a little material because you can't actually change the field and color it differently. That actually is an NCAA rule now. You can't do that. So
I think that's a bad rule, by the way. I think you should be able to paint your field whatever you want because why not? I mean, if you want to do something different, do something different. All of a sudden, either this is one of the things I can't stand. It's like Boise and a few other schools are grandfathered in. Eastern Michigan, correct. Eastern Washington, Central Arkansas has a purple field. Either all the field should be green, and you should say that, or anyone can make their field whatever solid color they want. But
only two teams that have colored it. It's Boise and Eastern Washington.
No, it's a lot more than that in the NCAA. If you look down the line in Division 2 and 3, and even the NAIA, it's either look, if we're going to treat all these schools the same, right? Then treat them all the same. Well, anyway.
Here's the secret: they're not treated the same.
Well, that depends on what we're talking. Moving on. UCF against Cincinnati, Friday night, 8 p.m. ESPN. Huge game in the Eastern Division, obviously. This is the fifth all-time meeting. UCF has won 3 of the previous 4. And UCF comes in a 4-point favorite. All of the indicators, S&P Plus, even the predicted score from OddsShark are projecting a pretty close game, possibly high scoring. Again, UCF is a 4-point favorite. 68% of the money is on UCF -4. That's up from 3.5 where it opened. Bovada has it at 4.5, by the way. 60% of the money is, 65% of the money is on the over, which is the over/under is 60 for this game. 4-1 against 3-1 here, Eric Lopez. The Bearcats, the one loss was to Ohio State, 42-0. They got their rear ends handed to them in that game, but they can erase that with a victory at home here. Nippert Stadium is going to be wild, regardless of what color the field is. Here we go, man. This is the first big conference game. What's going to be, based on what we saw last week against UConn, did we learn anything from that we're going to be able to glean forward for Friday night?
No, I think UConn's like a scrimmage. It's a glorified scrimmage. UConn's an FCS program. I don't care what they say. They're an FCS program. I think the best thing about it was that UCF came out sharp in that game. They were crisp early, put the game away early. On both sides
of the ball, too, on defense, too.
Correct. And I think, nobody got hurt that I'm aware of seriousness from it. You got away healthy in that game. And I think now you're ready for the Cincinnati. Cincinnati looked good, too. They arguably played their best game on Saturday at Marshall. In particular, Desmond Ridder, who I think is the key to this game. Desmond Ridder is the quarterback. He's been up and down. He's coming off his best game. He's a mobile quarterback. He can run. He can pass. He's their third leading rusher. He's also thrown 8 touchdown passes this year. UCF shut him down last year. They made him one-dimensional. I think that's the key to this Friday night's game. Cincinnati wants to rush the football. Now, a lot of attention goes towards Michael Warren, who's their leading rusher. He's got 273 yards and 4 touchdowns. But they got this other guy, Tavian Thomas, who's just as good. In fact, he was the better runner in the Marshall game. And then you got Ridder, who's averages about 8 to 10 carries a game. He's mobile. He can be a threat. So I'll be curious to see how the UCF defensive line handles the Cincinnati offensive line. How do they handle a guy like Ridder, who likes to be both run and pass? So you got to be, can you keep him in the pocket, try to force him to beat you with his accurate passing if possible? And I think that's going to be the challenge to me. Is last year UCF played their best defensive game the whole year against Cincinnati at home, prime time, and part of the reason was they kind of kept Ridder in the pocket. He didn't hurt them with his legs. I think that's going to be an interesting factor, because if he does hurt them with their legs, he could buy some extra time, and that could create some big plays. So that's going to be the key. This is a huge game. I know for a fact Cincinnati has circled this game all year. From talking to people that are familiar with the program up there, this is a big game for them. It's going to be packed, and I think it'll be interesting how Dylan Gabriel and this UCF team handles the road. They've looked great at home, and they've looked great in the state of Florida, but the one time they left the state of Florida, they struggled against Pittsburgh. We'll see if they learn from that on Friday night.
This is Cincinnati's Super Bowl, and I said earlier that, regardless of what the field looks like, it still kind of scares me a little bit, because you're going to get their best shot in a hostile environment. It's going to be sold out. It's going to be loud. And as we'll hear from Mike Schneid from Down the Drive a little bit later, I think he makes a good point that when that place is packed, and every once in a while it is, and when it's a big event, like a night game against a marquee opponent, which this is on Friday, there are, aside from Spectrum Stadium, there's probably no more raucous atmosphere in the American than at Cincinnati. I me, I'm always, kind of scared about games like this. Friday nights. We've seen how many Friday night upsets have we seen over the years, right? Do I have reason to be frightened about this? It's the Lions 4.
You can't. You got at some point you got to play good teams. You can't duck them. So, that's how sports works. But
yeah, I know. But this is one of those things where UCF is going on the road, and
yeah. Nobody knows that more than UCF. In fact, earlier this week, Josh Heupel said, "Hey, we know what we're going to get ourselves into going into Cincinnati this week."
It's going to be a great atmosphere inside the stadium. You know, they're a really good football team in all three phases of the game. They're well coached. They play a physical brand of football. They're going to make you earn it. We have to prepare with a great sense of urgency, understand the competitive environment that we're getting ourselves into, and prepare in a championship way.
That's Coach Heupel from earlier this week on, I think it was Tuesday, after practice there. Here's the thing, right? So you hope that the Pittsburgh game kind of makes you prepared for this game, right? Like you went through that adversity. You fell behind early. It was raucous at Pittsburgh. I thought the student section at Pittsburgh was loud. It was tremendous, good atmosphere. So I think this team is prepared for that, and they're going to be ready for that. To me, it's not a question of the environment. The question is about execution. And it's going to be this offensive line execute against the Cincinnati defensive front. Last year, they protected Mackenzie Milton, and as a result, he was able to torch the Cincinnati secondary. The Cincinnati secondary couldn't keep up with the UCF receivers. Because really, if you look back at last year's game, UCF kind of attacked them from the air. Cincinnati actually did a pretty good job controlling the running game for UCF up until the end. So, Dylan Gabriel, can he get time and make some throws to Gabe Davis against that Cincinnati secondary, or does Cincinnati put pressure on Gabriel like the passing game? And that's where the crowd could come in. So there's reason to be concerned. There's no question about it, especially after what we saw against Pittsburgh. Because if we were having this conversation 3 weeks ago, probably not. We'd be like, we'll be fine. Yeah, there should be pause for concern. Now, the good news is I think you would think they learned from the Pittsburgh game and they'd be ready to play. But Cincinnati's going to be ready to play. I would not be surprised if Luke Fickell comes out and blitzes Dylan Gabriel, right? Like, if you watch the tape, Jeff, if you watch that Pittsburgh game and you're Luke Fickell, that would be a couple of things that jumps out, right? You're going to blitz Dylan Gabriel, mix up the coverage, and you're going to try to be physical at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm going to try and basically what I'm going to do is try and take advantage of the fact that he's a true freshman. Right, so get in his face, get him off his spot, try and pressure him. I think from the parts that I saw where I think Pittsburgh did a really good job, it wasn't their edge rushing, it was their middle rushing. I think they did a very good job rushing from the middle. They got in his face a little bit. You don't have to sack him a whole lot. You just have to get some arms flying around him. And like you said, you can do basic sort of disguise coverages and just see how much he's learned from that game. That said, he still had that wild third quarter where UCF scored 31 points in 13 and a half minutes. They had the special teams touchdown, but he got some time. He got UCF back on top. And then I think it comes down to not doing what you did late in the game, which is letting them back in the game through defensive penalties. UCF has had their problems with penalties, although Cincinnati has had a lot of problems with penalties this year. They're next to last in the country in most penalties, or almost. They're second in the country in most penalties per game. They're averaging 10 penalties a game for 82 yards per game too. So that's something that they have to look at. And I think you mentioned, on offense with Desmond Ridder. Cincinnati's offense has been, I think, less than spectacular for the most part. They seem to get their feet underneath them at Marshall, but they're only 73rd in the country in total offense. I am concerned about. I'm sorry.
I don't
go
think
ahead.
they want to get into a shoot. I don't think they want to get into a shootout. I think if this game gets into the 30-40s, that's in UCF's favor. I think Cincinnati ideally would like to shorten the game. Luke Fickell is a defensive coach. He's a background of defense. I think that they would like to protect the football. They would like to dominate the line of scrimmage. And they would like to keep this in the 20s and the 30s.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I look at is, and you mentioned it, is the strength of their team is the secondary. They're 15th in the country in fewest passing yards allowed. They're only averaging giving up about 167 yards per game through the air. They're averaging giving up 130 on the ground, which is 47th. But this could be a good opportunity to for the backs for UCF to have a good game. For Greg McCrae and possibly Adrian Killens to break some out. I think I'd like to see a little bit more Benno Thompson as well in fits and starts to try and open up that passing game as much as you can to try and cut down on the aggressiveness of the secondary on the outside. So that's going to be a big key for UCF, I think, is and I think if Josh Heupel were sitting here with us, he'd say the same thing that he always says, like, we got to run the ball, because his offense, for all the high flying that everyone thinks it is. It's a rushing offense. It's a rush-first offense, and that's okay. I think that you have to play to your strengths here. So it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a tough matchup. I think, again, if it comes down to the one key for UCF that I'm thinking of, it's do what you've been doing well to this point. I thought the big issue in the Pittsburgh game was they fell down early, and if they're going to take care of the Cincinnati game the way that they should, they need to take the crowd out of the game early. Quick turnover, quick 3-and-out, something, get the ball and score. And then get another 3-and-out and score again. If you go up, 10-14-0 in the first 5-7 minutes, that could really that can take some air out of the place.
Well, I make Ritter a one-dimensional player. Try to throw the football. If you struggle against them early running the football, Cincinnati averages about 4 yards a pop. They average 186 yards on the ground. If you can stop the run for Cincinnati like you did last year in last year's game, that's going to make Ritter a one-dimensional player. If you don't, that opens up play-action pass, and you're exposed to potential big plays via the play-action pass. That's what Ritter lives off, and then as well as the read option for him. So I think we'll know early. I mean, it's going to be exciting. Now, you're right. There could be a lot of penalties here. UCF has to stay disciplined. I mean, penalties killed him in the Pittsburgh game as well, so I think both teams do. So this could be a long 4-hour game. And then you hope, if UCF comes off to a good start. I don't think Cincinnati's a come-from-behind team. They're not built, in my opinion. I don't think Ritter's a guy that can lead a comeback down 2-3 scores. So I agree. If UCF gets off to a big start early, I think that'll take the crowd out and really probably kind of suck the air out of the stadium.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the key. And it's always the key on the road, right? Just take the air out of the joint and let everybody know that, okay, we're here for business. One thing I got to give credit to Pitt for is what Kenny Pickett was able to do was he kind of mixed it up, and I thought that Pitt was very efficient in using a sort of 4-minute offense. They kind of did a little bit of a UCF to UCF where they kept the pace up but not too quick, where they were still keeping their defense off the field enough, but they were keeping UCF's defense off balance. And I think Desmond Ritter can do sort of the same thing, but if they're able to keep him in the pocket, make him like you said, one-dimensional, and then let the defensive line get up there and tee off. Looking forward to seeing Randy Charlton back in the action, who did not play last week, and then also Richie Grant did not play last week, but we'll see. Having those two guys back should be a big boost to UCF, and like you said, having basically a scrimmage against UConn in the week before helps too, doesn't it?
It does. I do wonder on short yardage, 3rd and short, 4th and short, if we see Darryl Mack line up at quarterback.
I would love to see that.
Well, I
especially a goal to go, right? Like have him be.
Yes.
I hate invoking Tim Tebow, but have him do what Tim Tebow did in his freshman year.
Well, and the thing is, I just don't think Gabriel's a guy that likes to run. At least not at this stage. I think he's more of a, hey, I'd rather throw the football. And whereas Mac's more instinctively of a runner, and I think he's more bigger and he can run, get short yardage. So, you talk about the UConn game. We haven't brought it up. Is Mac's debut playing there and get rust off in the second half? And I don't think that was by accident. I've said this since the beginning of the year, that I believe this year is a 2-quarterback year for UCF. And I'm still going to stick to that. Even though I think Gabriel's the future, I think Mac has a role here, and I think Mac's role is going to be in particular on short yardage. It would not surprise me, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see Mac in the goal line situation moving forward. Why not? I mean, he's very good. And we saw that. How many times did he score last year, Jeffrey, out of that position, especially in the conference championship game?
He had the school record, 4 touchdowns in that game. So.
And the thing about him is he's a threat. It's not like they've tried that with Brandon Wimbush a couple times, and teams didn't really respect it. Whereas Mac can hurt you with the pass, so it's not like the passing game is eliminated by bringing in Mac in a situation like that. So I would not be surprised if we see Mac play some here, and I'm okay with it personally. I don't believe. People are wondering why isn't Gabriel running, and people coming up with theories. The coaches don't want him to run, and I'm like, I don't really buy that. I just don't think Dylan Gabriel wants to run. I don't think that if you look at his high school numbers, he was a passer. Some guys just want to pass and stay in the pocket, and I think that's who Dylan Gabriel is at this time, and that's okay. I think that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, looking at what DJ did against UConn. Remember, it was his first action of the season. I just wanted to pull up the numbers for you. He had 27 net yards rushing on 6 carries. And then passing in that game, he was 9 of 13 for 97 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions. So, pretty good. I mean, granted, you're playing against Connecticut's, 2s and 3s out there, so it's not exactly like mind-blowing competition. But he was efficient and looked pretty much like he should look against that level of competition in his first game. So. I'm hoping that that we will see him again in this game, and he's definitely a threat in short yardage as we know very well. So again, kickoff is at 8:00 on Friday in Cincinnati. Latest line is 4 in favor of UCF. By the way, it's going to be cold up there for this game. Did you see the forecast?
No, I have not.
46 degrees and partly cloudy.
Whoa!
So fall, it's if you're heading up to Cincinnati, you're gonna get a dose of fall football weather. It's gonna be 69% humidity, nice breeze, 8 miles an hour out of the northeast. I mean the fall has reached up north, and UCF's gonna be heading into. It's not gonna be freezing, but it's gonna be cold. I'll tell you, I don't know, man. This just has all this game is making me nervous every time I think about it, because I don't know. Somebody talked me out of it. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit more about this game with Mike Schneid from Down the Drive when we return. Talk about Cincinnati and UCF and what UCF fans have to look for on the Bearcats side in just a moment. Stick around. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is back after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon joining you as we start our preview of UCF and Cincinnati on Friday night at Nippert Stadium, 8 p.m. It should be a wild atmosphere and a hostile one for UCF at that. Cincinnati comes in 3-1 on the season, and they, although UCF, even on the road, is a 4-point favorite according to OddsShark, with 69% of the money on UCF. The over/under total is 60. And joining us now is the site manager of DownTheDrive.com. That's the Cincinnati Bearcats team site on the SB Nation Network. Mike Schneid joining us from not Cincinnati, but New York, where he is stationed. But nonetheless, it's good to have you on board, Mike. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you having me. Hello to all of UCF Nation. Looking forward to what should be a really awesome game on Friday.
Well, this is probably, well, you tell me, is this the biggest game of the year for Cincinnati?
It is. Fans and players and coaches have had this game circled all year. I know we obviously played Ohio State week 2, but that's more of a measuring stick game. I don't think anyone realistically expected us to win that game. Obviously expected to be more competitive, but this is it. I mean, this is the game. If we don't want to play in the Birmingham Bowl or the Gasparilla Bowl, I know you guys don't know what any of that stuff means over the last couple of years, but we want the Cotton Bowl. We want the conference championship. And the only way to do that, as the legendary Ric Flair once said, in order to be the man, you have to beat the man. And there's no question that UCF is the man. So this is it. I mean, if we don't win this game, we're not going to win the conference championship. It's that simple. So, yes, I mean, this is the biggest game of the season by far.
This is the 5th all-time meeting between UCF and Cincinnati. It is the 3rd at Nippert Stadium. The first time is in 2015, which was a catastrophe for UCF. Well, everything in 2015 was a catastrophe for UCF. And then in 2017, it was a catastrophe of equal magnitude for Cincinnati. That was the game that was shortened by thunderstorms in the area with through 3 quarters. It was a 51-23 UCF. UCF scored 51 points in 3 quarters on a Bearcat team that was still feeling out the new regime under Luke Fickell. But this seems like the Cincinnati team that Bearcat fans have been waiting a little while for here now. I know that you guys have been looking forward to this, but describe for us the atmosphere at Nippert Stadium, because you've been pretty vocal about it, about how, at Nippert on a night game, it gets pretty wild when the Bearcats are good. We know what that's like, and I'm sure Cincy fans remember back to last year, the win at not Bright House Network Stadium, but Spectrum Stadium for UCF on the day when College Game Day was in town, and Cincy was something of a bit player in the production. But this is Cincinnati's chance for a coming out party. So what is it about the atmosphere at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati that UCF fans need to be wary of?
Well, I'll tell you this to start. It's being wary of the atmosphere in general, because UCF and Cincinnati are in the same boat where, obviously, yes, I know that the bounce house and everything with Spectrum and with UCF, I know that stadium and the atmosphere is amazing. But when you leave home, you guys go where? To Connecticut in front of 500 people? To Tulane in front of 500 people? ECU, UCF, and Temple are playing in 75% empty NFL stadiums. So both of our teams are in this weird predicament where you're never tested on the road. You don't get to see a big-time college football atmosphere. So I think when Cincinnati went to UCF last year, as much as they were prepared for the crowd noise with the simulations indoors all week, they weren't ready. I think it was way louder than anybody expected, and I think the offense was rattled. And that's the hope on Friday as well, is that UCF has never faced during this couple-year run, during this 3-year run, that they've never seen anything like Nippert Stadium. The best way to describe it, Bob Davie did it before he took the New Mexico job when he was still working at ESPN, was calling one of the Cincinnati games and basically said, this is an SEC environment. Jesse Palmer, when he was calling the Thursday night games, was always speaking very highly of Nippert and the Cincinnati fans as well, saying that this atmosphere compares to nothing else. That the problem for other teams with Nippert Stadium is it's kind of in the ground. It's a 40,000 seat stadium. The seats are very low, and it gets very, very loud in there. And I don't think UCF has seen anything like it. I don't know if it'll be a factor, but it's definitely a wild, crazy experience, especially on these night games, especially when Cincinnati is at its best. Like you said, 2015, even 2017, those games weren't like a prime Cincinnati year, so to speak. So I don't think it's fair to compare what happened in 2017 to what's going to happen on Friday.
Well, it seats 40,000 for football. The all-time record at Nippert Stadium since 2000 for attendance was 40,124. I have a sneaky suspicion that it's going to be that record might be threatened.
Might be 125 on Friday.
This Friday.
They might go over by one. And part of the thing is that UCLA and Miami were both, or only 2 home games so far, those were both sold out. Those were both allowed. So you can only imagine what happens. We also don't exactly face ranked teams all that often, right, as you would expect in our conference. That's another big part of it.
Yeah. Now let's talk about a little bit of the action on the field, and I want to talk about the Cincinnati offense, which has had ups and downs this season. Right now, the Bearcats are through 4 games are averaging over 408 yards of total offense. Luke Ritter has 8 touchdown passes on the year on just under 65% completions. And then Michael Warren is back once again. He's averaging about 65 yards a game and has 4 touchdowns. But it feels like the production for Cincinnati this year on offense has been relatively low compared to what they were expecting, hasn't it?
It has. I think throughout the first couple of games, the offense might have taken a step back. The offensive line has been a major weakness for this team. I think that's definitely part of the problem. And it's Desmond Ridder. I think you said Luke Ridder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Desmond Ridder. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the quarterback just hasn't had a lot of time, and I honestly think that it's messing with his confidence a little bit. I think the Ohio State game hurt, losing 42-0, getting hit on every single play. When you're a guy like Desmond Ridder and you're growing up and you're always the best quarterback, you're always the man, and everyone's telling you that you're the best, to play like that, I think it messed with his head a little bit. When they played Miami the next week and he struggled in the first half, I think his confidence was a little bit shot. I think it kills your confidence when you're playing behind an offensive line that's giving you 1 to 2 seconds to throw. So I think the offensive line has certainly been an issue. Michael Warren hasn't put up the same type of numbers. He's certainly been very productive. His yards per carry is down by almost a full yard. So, and Cincinnati's breaking in a whole bunch of new, young and inexperienced wide receivers. I think it's taken a couple of games for Ridder and those receivers to get comfortable. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a slower start. The Ohio State game obviously skews a lot of those numbers. And then the fact that we did play UCLA, as bad as they might be, they are still a real team that we played week 1. So we don't necessarily have – we've been building up. And I think we saw that offense come together last week against Marshall, putting up 52 points and finally really clicking on all cylinders.
Let's switch sides to the defense, which right now is the strength of this team. 23rd in the country in total defense, 15th in pass defense in terms of yards allowed. Definitely raises some eyebrows amongst UCF fans with the deep passing game. What has worked for Cincinnati on defense to this point this year?
The front seven. The front seven's definitely the strength. What's interesting about the defense being so successful is James Wiggins, our best defender, was ruled out for the season a couple of days before UCLA with the torn ACL. He's a guy who had 4 interceptions last year. 3 of them were game winners. So that loss was expected to be huge. His replacements have done an admirable job filling in. The linebackers are all excellent, and there's 5 or 6 or 7 defensive linemen that just keep rotating. One of the things that Luke Fickell and defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman do that they do so successfully is they just keep rotating and they just keep everyone fresh. So each drive you'll see somebody new, and I mean these guys are able to get to the quarterback. They're able to put that pressure on. Linebackers definitely been a huge strength, and then the corners are able to lock down as well, and that's been a big part of why the safety position has been able to be filled the way that it has been, because the corners have done a good job locking down on opposing receivers.
Flip it forward to Friday night, and let me ask you this. All right, you're watching the game, and if this one thing happens in the course of the game, it's going to be a good night for Cincinnati. What is that thing going to be?
I think it's turnovers. I think if the defense can force a couple of turnovers, if they can bring the pressure on Dylan Gabriel, rattle him a little bit, make him uncomfortable. That's what I was preaching before we played Ohio State, before I realized that Justin Fields was the best quarterback in football. I wanted to make him uncomfortable and hit him. And that's what Cincinnati needs to do to Gabriel. In a legal, respectful way, of course. They just need to hit him in the mouth and put pressure on him and rattle him a little bit. If Gabriel starts throwing interceptions, I think that's the key. As I think Cincinnati really needs to force some turnovers and then, of course, capitalize on those. But if Gabriel starts to get a little bit wild, then I think it's going to be a good night for Cincinnati.
On the flip side of that, what will you see, or what indication from Cincinnati would lead you to believe it's going to be a long night?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think I mentioned the offensive line is a huge weakness. If UCF is able to bring the house every time, and if Ridder can't get his throws off, if he starts getting rattled and starts throwing interceptions, then it's going to be a long day for the offense also. I don't mean to give the same answer, but that's it. that's how it's been all year, is that the offense is the one that's holding Cincinnati back at times. So, yeah, if Ritter is unable to get the passes off and if the offensive line struggles, then it could be a long day.
Last question for you. This is kind of there's a little bit of a renaissance right now with Cincinnati football coming back to the fore. Is this something that you believe is going to be sustainable for the University of Cincinnati, or is this just a peak that's going, or could this just be a peak that could easily be followed by a valley? For example, if Luke Fickell, say, decides to move on or something like that. What's the sense in Bearcat country about is Cincinnati football here to stay?
Well, I think you just answered the question yourself. I think it comes down to Luke Fickell. We have experienced so much turnover. It was one coach for 3 years, one coach for 3 years, one coach for 3 years, and then it was Tommy Tuberville and that disaster for 4 years. So we're in year 3 of Luke Fickell, obviously 11 wins last year and trending hopefully towards double-digit wins again this season. But it really comes down to him staying long-term. I don't know that Cincinnati can continue to recycle coaches, and it's hard to answer that question about long-term and sustained success without knowing who would come in for Luke Fickell. I think as long as he's here, this team is on the rise, and this team will be a perennial conference contender every year. He's doing a really good job recruiting. As you know, Cincinnati is sort of a hotbed for players. There's been a lot. I believe it's the 6th most NFL players were born and raised in Cincinnati. So the previous regimes did a really, really terrible job of building up relationships with the local coaches. It's what Luke Fickell has preached. It is what he has prioritized since day one, is relationships with the local high school coaches and getting those players and keeping them in state. And our recruiting classes show that. Our recruiting classes have been in the top 50 the last couple of years, which, nationally isn't that exciting, but for an AAC team and for Cincinnati, it's obviously very exciting. And he's got a top 5 quarterback coming in next season, a highly touted linebacker. So the success is sustainable so long as Luke Fickell is here. Otherwise, it's hard to say without knowing who would fill his shoes. All
right. Well, maybe this could be the spark of something new on Friday. Of course, we here at UCF hope not, but it's going to be a wild night, perhaps a taste of UCF's own medicine in terms of the crowd atmosphere at Nippert Stadium. 8:00 Friday night kickoff on ESPN. UCF against Cincinnati. Mike Schneid, site manager from Down the Drive. Real quick, where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me personally at MSChneid, SCHNAID, or you can follow Cincinnati at Down the Drive. If you do follow me personally, I will say this. I am a big advocate for UCF. I don't buy into all this media hype, media hoopla and the noise. I do respect and support what you guys have done. I think it's 29 of 31 games. I mean, to me, that's amazing. I know that the response to that is, well, you haven't played anybody. Well, if you haven't played anybody, then neither is Cincinnati, neither is Memphis, neither is Houston. And those teams haven't won 29 of 31. And if the AAC is better than the Mountain West, then that means Boise State really hasn't played anyone. And they haven't won 29 of 31. So I get sick of the noise, and I get sick of hearing people say, well, go join a real conference because, you guys can just pack your bags and go to the Big 12 anytime you want, I guess. Or go play someone. When you scheduled that Stanford game, they were top 10 in the country 5 years ago. So I don't know what people expect. I just want to say I do have a ton of respect for UCF. I admire the streak, and I hope the streak takes a hit on Friday, but I hope you guys continue this meteoric rise because it's great for the conference and it's good for Cincinnati to have some great competition.
You hear that, UCF Twitter Mafia? Be nice to Mike. Mike Schneid from Down the Drive.
Don't tweet those burning night gifts at me, please. I'm sick of seeing those.
Was it the guys from Fear the Wave were like, yeah, a Twitter thread is going off the rails when you see the burning night gift. It's just you just have to get out of there real quick. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the game on Friday, and we'll talk to you come basketball season. All right.
Yeah, appreciate it. Take care.
All right, thanks again to Mike for joining us, and make sure you follow Down the Drive. They're good people over there covering the Bearcats. Eric Lopez back with me here. So what are we making of that? I wanted to ask you about two things before we take a break: TV audience and the spread. Do you think, because UCF is at -4, it's gone up a little bit. It's from 3.5. It's in 4.5 at some places. You think that's about right?
It depends on your perspective. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, think about it. If UCF's about a 4.5-point favorite on the road, if this game was, the home team usually gets 3 points.
Right.
So what that basically tells you is that if this game was played at UCF would be more than a touchdown favorite. It'd be about a 7.5 point favorite deal there. So, do you expect a blowout like last year? You probably think it's low. Now, I would caution Cincinnati. I think if you put a truth serum, I think last Saturday night, last year, primetime, ABC, I think that got to Cincinnati. I think they were overwhelmed by the crowd. They were
a bit part, and they were not ready for that. I don't know if anyone could be ready for that kind of an atmosphere.
Correct.
To be honest with you.
Correct. Whereas this time they're at home in that deal. The thing that makes you nervous about those numbers, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, outside of the Memphis game last year at Memphis, where UCF won by a point, I believe every game UCF has won in the Josh Heupel era has been double digits.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So I mean, you can look that up. And the reason I bring that up is if you're taking UCF, the odds are that UCF will cover, and rather maybe comfortably. They don't play close games. And that's something that some people have brought up as a concern. I don't know. Are you concerned about that? And it sounds bizarre in a weird way that UCF does not play in close games. That worries you a little bit. That maybe that hurt them in the Pittsburgh game because they weren't in a situation like that. Now, some of those scores are a little misleading because they were games going into the fourth quarter, and then UCF maybe put in an extra touchdown to make the score bigger. So is that a concern about – do you have that concern that you don't play close games normally? I don't know. Do you buy into that theory?
I do, especially when you have a freshman quarterback. I think with Mackenzie Milton it was a little bit different. Like you think back to the Memphis game at Memphis last year. You had a well-seasoned veteran quarterback back there leading you to victory, right? When you put the ball in the hands of a freshman, and I know Dylan's a cool customer. He really is. But we've seen already in a close game at Pitt, down 1 with 1 minute to go, he takes 2 sacks, and you can't do that. You can't tell me that UCF wouldn't have had the weapons to at least get into field goal range in that situation. If you had a player with a little bit more experience in their back pocket there, right? Okay, and I hate playing this game. I feel bad because it sounds like I'm getting on Dylan's case. But if you put McKenzie in there, a healthy McKenzie in there for that last drive with a minute to go, you don't think UCF gets into field goal range against Pitt? I do. You can't take 2 sacks in the final minute. Now, hopefully he learned from that, and that's where I think the loss at Pitt in the long term may end up doing this team and these players, especially Dylan Gabriel, some good. But you mentioned it, 1-score games, okay? UCF in the Josh Heupel era, from 2018 till now, has played in 1, 2, and Pitt would be 3 games decided by 1 score. And UCF is 1-2 in both of those games. They won the Memphis game. They lost the Fiesta Bowl to LSU, and they lost 2 weeks ago to Pitt. Now that matters to me, and partially because your close games are where teams are forged. Great teams are forged, and I think that if this is a close game, it's going to be real. The onus is going to fall on Dylan Gabriel to not do what he did in the Pitt game and settle down, find his receivers, and maybe make some plays that normally we wouldn't have to really worry about. In 2017 under Scott Frost, by the way, Eric Lopez, UCF played 2 games that were decided by, 1, 2, 3, 4 games decided by one score, and they won all 4 of them. SMU, USF, Memphis in the championship game, obviously, and then Auburn. So, yeah, and that was the last 3 games of the season, right? South Florida, Memphis, and Auburn against 3 ranked teams, and 3 one-score games. One of them went to overtime, and UCF won all 3 of those games. So that's how you forge that experience. So
if you're Luke Fickell in Cincinnati, and this is a 3-point game going into the fourth quarter, you're feeling good, right?
Oh, you're feeling real good. Because then I feel like you would want to, sick the defense on the freshman. But this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. The wild card in this is, does Josh Heupel then flip the deck and go with Darryl Mack, a guy with a little bit more experience, right? Even though he's only played in one half this year. Do you then put in a certain moment? Do you have the quick hook on Dylan and maybe you put Darryl in there to try and settle things down a little bit? I don't know. What does that do to Dylan Gabriel? Man, it's kind of when you think about it, it's kind of a nice problem to have.
You got to let it play out. You got to let it play out. And again, my point is on the spread is if you believe Cincinnati can win this game, then that if it's a close game, you would pick Cincinnati. Whereas if you're going to pick UCF, I would not pause at the 4.5. If you feel confident that UCF will win, the odds are they're going to cover that. Like I do, I think they will cover. But I think you'll know by the first half. I think I don't think UCF can afford to get off to the slow start like they did in Pittsburgh. Could they come back? Sure, but I just wouldn't recommend that in Cincinnati because I think that would give Cincinnati the confidence. And I think it's the other way around. If Cincinnati gets off to a bad start, that takes away their confidence. So this is a very psychological game in a lot of ways because if UCF jumps on Cincinnati, it's almost like it's a continuation of last year's game. Whereas if Cincinnati gets off to a great start, all of a sudden it's like, oh boy, is this Pittsburgh all over again?
Yeah.
I think
remember Cincinnati got off to a good start last year. Remember they had the fumble on the first play, the defensive score, and then UCF just kind of chipped away and then finally broke through with a couple of touchdowns and they had the blocked
Milton
field
was
goal.
Very good. As I mentioned earlier, Milton was very good. And he got great protection from the offensive line, and they were able to go over the top against Cincinnati in the passing game because Cincinnati played to stop the run. So if that is to happen here again, can Dylan Gabriel do the same thing that McKenzie did last year? Yeah, I think you're right. One last thing before we take a breather, TV numbers down this year in the last couple games for UCF. 322,000 viewers watched UCF demolish UConn on ESPN2. I think that was pretty much because the game was over in the first 5 minutes. But nonetheless, that still, you wrote on blackandgoldbanneret.com, it's down from the 444,000, which was last year, although that was the Thursday night of the opener. Opener, right? And that was on ESPNU, and that was with, oh my God, thank God football's back being the big storyline. Sure. So, but is there any indication from your end, because you follow these numbers closer than anybody I know, is there any indication that there's a little bit of worry about erosion of the TV audience for UCF right now? Well, let me explain it this way. First of all, ratings are down in general slightly in college football. But here's a newsflash: people don't like blowouts. So why do you think that is? We've had some pretty good games so far this year, though we haven't had any classics really yet. No, in my opinion, and we're not going to get into it in this episode, I think the sport as a whole, the product right now, is not good. I think there's only a handful of good teams, and I think there's a lot of the way the game is being played now, it leans yourself to a lot of mismatches and a lot of blowouts. So I just don't think the product's great. But that's beside the point. I think, first of all, UConn's not a TV draw in football. Right. All right. And I broke that down in the article. If you check Black and Gold Banneret, they have not drawn well, especially since Etzel's been back. They're not a big football draw. They're a basketball draw. So that doesn't help. I was shocked that this game was a 7:00 slate. To be honest with you, I was too. That seemed odd to me that they would do that. And I do wonder about this. When they made the selection, it was before the Pitt game. I wonder if they were just going with, well, they're going to beat Pitt, they're going to be undefeated, that storyline continues. I do wonder, now that UCF has lost, if that takes some of the interest away from watching UCF, because I think a part of the whole UCF angle the last couple of years was the fact that they kept winning. They were winning, and they had a long streak. Like, they were an afterthought over the weekend. Nobody really talked about them. It was a huge difference than that's been the last couple of years. So I wonder if UCF right now in the national perspective is on the backdrop, you know what I mean? Because they lost. And I think that kind of hurt the numbers too in the UConn game. It's like, well, you know, they lost, so it's no big deal now. I'm going to watch something else. So I'm very interested to see how they do against Cincinnati on Friday night. That's going to be interesting to me.
I think it's kind of a combination of that. I do think that UCF losing does take some of the luster out of the national draw, per se. And that's not to say that nobody watched the game. It's still 444,000. But I get what you're saying on that. I think that now the bigger draw for UCF would be, well, are you playing a really good team? You know, if it was a different opponent, and this plays into what you were saying, if it was, say, Cincinnati or Temple or USF on a Friday night, which we'll get this year, we have to wait on that time slot, but you know that should be a good.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but that should be a good. It'll at least be an interesting matchup, and that should be a good TV draw. I think we're just gonna have to wait and see. You know, the Tulane game might be pretty interesting. Looking down the line,
depends on the slot.
It depends on the slot.
This Friday will be interesting because that slot that ESPN has usually gets you about anywhere between 1.2 to 2 million viewers, depending on the matchup.
Does that do more people watch on Thursday or Friday night?
It's actually, you know, it varies. It depends on the matchup, because if they have a marquee Thursday, but the trend has been more better games on Friday. Why is that? Well, because there's this thing called the National Football League that's taken over Thursday nights. So as a result, you don't see the marquee games on Thursday night as much as you used to maybe back in the day. So I think slowly, yes, you are seeing more of an audience on Friday night than Thursday night. You're seeing more marquee programs playing on Friday night than Thursday night. For example, UCF are going to be playing a couple times in the written, not counting Black Friday, on Friday night. Notice they don't have a Thursday night game on ESPN. So I believe East Carolina and Temple, I believe, is the Thursday night game this week. So not a headliner, because
Have
again,
fun
the
with
NFL,
that.
the NFL is a monster on Thursday night. As much as, you know, it's funny, as much as people hate I hate NFL Thursday night football, is this or that, people still watch, and it's still the number one television program prime time of the week, which is nuts, considering people supposedly hate it. So, and I think this Friday is going to be interesting, though, because you got the Major League Baseball divisional playoffs going on. So they're going to go head to head. For example, the Yankees, the New York Yankees, which is arguably the biggest draw in baseball, will be going on at the same time. Game one of their American League Division Series against the Twins will be going on at the same time as the UCF football game. In fact, the Yankee game maybe gets a head start. I think they're like a 7:30 first pitch. Now, what's fascinating about that's an MLB Network game, which shocked me a little bit. It's not going to be on FS1. Now, FS1 has a couple games that day as well. So how does the game does against Major League Baseball is going to be interesting in the playoffs, especially when you have the Yankees and the Dodgers in prime time on Friday. Those are arguably your two biggest draws right now in the playoffs in Major League Baseball. So that's going to be a challenge for UCF football game. And while this is not a sport, there are viewers that would normally watch college football that will probably be watching WWE SmackDown on Fox, which has been super heavily promoted.
That starts this week, doesn't it?
It does, and they're going to have The Rock on the show, and they're going to have all this bells and whistles. So you wonder, do you lose a casual fan that, you know, there are people that watch football and watch wrestling. So do you lose some of those people that watch wrestling? So I'm very fascinated to see how the numbers do for Cincinnati. You would like to get it over 1 million. That's the goal. If you go under 1 million, then that's a little concerning.
Yeah. You know, I was just thinking, you brought this up also, and we'll take a break after this, but mentioning the baseball, you've got some major marquee markets in the baseball playoffs this year. In the AL, you have, obviously, the Yankees are a draw anyway, even though they're playing the Twins, not a big market, but the Yanks are the draw there. Houston is in the playoffs once again. They'll be playing either Tampa Bay or Oakland. Well, that'll probably be decided by the time you hear this, but Houston, number 4 market in the country in terms of TV viewers. And on the NL side, you have the Braves, national brand. You have St. Louis, national brand, playing each other. You got the Dodgers, of course. And then you have Washington playing the Dodgers as well. So yeah, this is going to be this next month might be a difficult one for college football in that sort of UCF level, as they're going up against some marquee. I mean,
well,
don't they want Yankees and Dodgers in the World Series again? Huh? I mean,
well, that would be ideal, especially. And there's a little factoid. This is really why probably Brian is not with us. The Yankees, I don't know if you realize this because you're a Yankee fan. You realize the Yankees have not made the World Series this decade.
Yeah, the last World Series was 2009.
The last time the Yankees went a decade without making a World Series appearance, you want to guess?
It was the 1980s.
No, they made it that one time.
Oh, that's right. 1981, they did make it.
Good guess, because that's arguably the worst decade in Yankee history.
Yeah, let's see. 70s they won twice. 60s they won in the beginning. 50s, obviously. 40s, 30s, 20s. I don't think it's ever happened.
It happened in the 1910s.
God, I don't even think they were called the Yankees at that time.
You would know better than I do. I just know that is the last decade that the Yankees franchise, or whatever they were called as, if they weren't the Yankees.
They might have been the Highlanders at that point.
They might have been. When was Babe Ruth sold to the Yankees? Was that
1921?
So they had, wow. Yeah.
So well, they were so they were renamed the Yankees in 1913. So that was the decade. They were the New York Highlanders for 10 years after they moved from Baltimore in 1903, and they were the Highlanders for 10 years, and then they became the Yankees in 1913. So yeah,
that's pretty amazing. So they did not reach the World Series that decade. Since then, every decade they have reached at least the World Series appearance in the decade, at least one. So that's a storyline that'll develop in baseball. And you brought it up. Here's the thing. Major League Baseball, if you look at the way they've changed their postseason schedule, they've made an effort to try to avoid going head-to-head against the NFL as much as possible. Their target is to go after college football.
Yeah.
And the reason is because a lot of, as you know this, having traveled in the Northeast, which baseball is still big, that's still a hot baseball sports talk radio sport. Nobody cares about college football up north. And you look at them, and that's where. So it'll be very fascinating, not just this Friday, but in the coming weeks, how big college football is affected, like you mentioned, going against the baseball playoffs.
All right, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. We're going to take a break. When we get back, we got a busy week of action, weekend of action in soccer and volleyball, and
Judgment Week.
It is Judgment Week in those sports, and we'll preview all that coming up in just a moment. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Back after this. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. Brian Murphy has the show off, but this is the segment when he likes to joke, when he usually likes to take off anyway. When we're talking about non-football sports here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, and if you haven't been paying attention, now's the time to pay attention. This is a huge week for both soccer programs and the volleyball program in terms of big-time conference matchups, and we're going to start with men's soccer. They have won, 6 in a row. They are unbeaten in their last 8. They beat FAU at home last night being Tuesday night. 3-2 in overtime. It was Cal Jennings who scored the game winner. Surprise, surprise. And UCF got the W. Luis Perez actually scored UCF's first 2 goals, including the game-tying goal in the 85th minute. And then Jennings scored in the 94th minute to give UCF the victory. But the Knights are now 7-1-1, and they are moving up in the polls. They are now up to number what is it? I think I just saw it. Number 11 right now in the United Soccer Coaches Poll, and that sets up a massive, massive game this Sunday for UCF men's soccer as they take on the SMU Mustangs, who are number 4 in the country. So number 4 versus number 11. It's in Dallas. It will be streamed on SMU's website.
It's actually going to be on American Digital Network.
It is. Well, okay, good. Well, I'm glad
Lincoln Rose is going to be calling that match.
Good, because I'm glad
Monday
that they're
night,
doing that
time.
too. Because this is the kind of matchup that they need to get on real quick over there too, and I'm glad that they did that.
Yeah.
8:00 Eastern Sunday night. So, man, this is huge, and we haven't seen the men's soccer RPI come out just yet, but no doubt this game is going to have a massive impact on that, and it's good for the conference, number 4 versus number 11. But man, is this a huge opportunity for UCF as they could. A victory here against SMU, and now you're talking top 10 ranking. No doubt, possibly a bye in the NCAA, assuming the rest of the season goes according to plan. But could we be thinking about, this is the first real test for them to see if they're a national championship contender, Eric?
Well, remember, they played number 1 ranked Wake Forest this year, and they played North Carolina to start the year. So they played.
But that's a little different. That's
playing.
That's the first couple games of the season. I know I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing it, but they lost by 1 goal, 2-1 at Wake, beat North Carolina 2-1 in Chapel Hill. But this is like the heat of the conference season. Familiarity breeds contempt. These teams have played each other a bunch of times in the conference tournament.
Oh yeah. Well,
in the past.
This is what's at stake here. You've got the 2 best teams in the conference. They have played for the conference championship the last 2 years. I think you were there last year when UCF hosted, but SMU won on penalty kicks in the final to win the championship. 2 years ago, they played in Dallas. SMU won on a golden goal. So this has been a nemesis that UCF has been not been able to get through as far as the conference tournament. The winner of this match takes a big step in winning the regular season title, takes a big step in hosting the conference championship, takes a big step in hosting not only in the regionals, but possibly put themselves in position to be hosting all the way up until the College Cup. Top Drawer Soccer has SMU ranked number 2, UCF's number 9. You can make the argument that these are 2 teams that are College Cup contenders. I don't know if we have ever said that, Jeffrey, in the modern era of UCF men's soccer, but that's what it's at stake. If they were to go into SMU and win, I think they would make a statement, and I think you would hear the conversation from the soccer people that they're a legit College Cup national title contender.
No, I think that's true. We know that, but it's one thing when the rest of the country knows it. And I think a victory over SMU would certainly vault UCF into national national conversation.
It's also a big match for players like Cal Jennings. Let's say Cal Jennings has a monster game and dominates that match against SMU. Mm-hmm. His possibility of winning the Herman Trophy, which is the Heisman of men's soccer, also increases. There's so many things on the line with this match. It is a monster matchup. It's the biggest men's soccer match of the year, you could argue, in the league. Maybe the biggest men's soccer regular season match they've had in the history of the league. Think about it. When have we had these 2 highly ranked teams in this conference before? I don't think we've had that since the league is. This is a monster matchup that's going to decide. And I think that influenced the FAU match a little bit. I think UCF was caught looking ahead. Fell behind a couple times. They had to come from behind to win. Louis Perez with a couple goals, and then Cal finished it off in overtime. They were fortunate. They didn't play their best, but they got the win, and that's what great teams do. But Scott Calabrese knows, no matter if it's SMU or not, when you're playing in conference, it's all about staying focused and locked in.
Conference play is more intense, and you need more concentration. There's just a different level that's expected, that's demanded, because there's more on the line. So I think it's a good reminder for the team that we absolutely have to meet that and hopefully set the bar with regard to that.
That was Scott Calabrese, and that was after the Temple win. By the way, they opened conference play last week. They shut out Temple. Prior to that the FAU match. They had shut out their opponents, I believe, 4 of their last 5 matches. Here's another interesting stat. You want to talk about UC fast? So UCF now has scored in 5 straight matches. They have scored within the first 7 minutes of the match.
That'll do it. That seems like it's right out of the Josh Heupel playbook, right? Get on top early.
It's a big match. It's an unbelievable. It's a weird slot, Sunday night, 8:00. You don't see that often in men's soccer, but hopefully a lot of people tune in. It will be on the digital network, as I mentioned. So it's a big match. It's a huge match. If you're UCF, honestly, a draw is not the worst thing in the world. When you're on, I always believe this. I don't know if you agree with this. If you're on the road, a draw is just as good as well. I mean, obviously you prefer the win, but if you get a draw, that's the second. That's just as good. It's a great result on the road against a team like SMU, who's just as good as anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge showcase for the league.
I think it depends on the plot of the game, right? If you have a lead, give up a late goal, and it ends up in a draw, then you're kind of not feeling so good about it, even if it's on the road. It's like, man, we could have stolen 3 points on the road here.
Good point.
On the other hand, if you fight to draw, you play well and you fight to a draw in a game that maybe you probably should have lost, then you feel a little bit differently about it. So it's just something we'll have to watch on Sunday night at 8:00 in the American Digital Network. By the way, one last update on Cal Jennings. He's got 9 goals on the season, and that is tied for second in the country with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with 6 other guys, including Jordan Hall of UConn, by the way, who scored 9 goals on the year. The nation's leader, by the way, is Kimarni Smith of Clemson. He's got 11.
And by the way, right behind Cal Jennings, Garrett McLaughlin of SMU has 8 goals. SMU, who's undefeated this year, averages 3.5 goals per game. They are they're just as dynamic offensively, Jeffrey. This is going to be a wild, wild match. I have a feeling, back and forth. 2 teams, they like to go up and down. They're averaging 3.5 goals a game, but they have only allowed 3 goals in 9 matches. SMU has outscored their opponents 31-3 this year. That is unbelievable. Now, in defense, they don't have the tough schedule that UCF has, although they do have a big win at Duke. That's their marquee win. They opened conference play last week with a 5-1 win at Tulsa. They're a very dominant team. This is they've shot 100. And here's the thing: you like shots, you're going to love this match. SMU has had 167 shots in 9 matches. That's almost 20 a game. And UCF likes to shoot as well. So this is this is going to be something.
This is going to be big. I'm going to be putting that one on the big TV and putting the NFL game on the laptop. That's how big this game's going to be. So 8:00 Sunday, UCF men's soccer against SMU. Women's soccer. They split their conference openers over the weekend. They were locked in another. Now we'll start on Thursday against Memphis. They were locked in another just knockdown, drag out street fight with Memphis again at the UCF Track and Soccer Complex. A late goal by Memphis that was controversial. Gave or not a late goal. It was in the 33rd minute, but it was a pretty controversial goal. Gave Memphis the win. Memphis is now 10-1. UCF is at the moment is 6-2 because they beat Tulsa on Sunday 3-0. But let's go back to that Memphis game. We know how difficult this is. This rivalry is between these two squads. And again, it comes down to mere inches where Samantha Murphy of Memphis kicked a ball that looked like it bounced off the crossbar, bounced straight down, bounced off the post, and bounced away. And the flag official, who was not really I saw a replay of it. The flag official, who was not in position to see whether the ball fully crossed the goal line, ruled it a goal.
Right, which is what got a lot of. I was there. There were a lot of people upset about that.
Yeah, it was really
upset.
Well, we couldn't even. You can't even really see the video replay of it. I've seen the video replay of it. It's still hard to tell even on video. I would lean toward it not going in, but it's just it stinks to lose on a call like that was so not clear cut. Especially a game of that magnitude. Yeah,
especially since you could argue you outplayed them. If you look at the stat sheet, they outplayed them. had more corners, had more control of the ball. I think that was a frustrating thing. I mean, coaches, you'll hear from Coach in a little bit. I mean, she felt good about how they played that match. It was just kind of a unlucky break. UCF had a similar shot in the second half that didn't go their way, went off the post. And that was a tough result there. Boy, you kind of wish there was replay maybe in college. There's talk about college baseball having replay in selective stadiums. Softball might be going in that direction. You wonder maybe if that's the next step in soccer, if they would ever consider that in the college game.
Yeah. Or at least goal cameras to see if the ball crossed over completely. Yeah.
And that stings a lot because Memphis would go on and beat South Florida, which is impressive to sweep the state of Florida. So Memphis has a stranglehold in this league right now to win the regular season title and host, and they're very legit. They're very good. And yet, if you're UCF, you felt you were right there with them, and that's the thing that hurts them. They bounce back. They beat Tulsa 3-0. I was there for both of those matches, and I had a chance to catch up with Coach Sahadak after the match, and she feels good about her team and especially her deep bench.
Sunday is always a tough match. Like you said, it's the heat. It's just a lot of load from Thursday, emotional. So the deep bench really comes into play, and I believe this is the deepest, most talented bench that we've ever had.
That's Coach Sahadak. And Jeffrey, she feels good. And they got a big match here at SMU, which we're going to talk about. But, we talk so much, and fans talk so much about the playoff system and how football is not good. And, the NCAA tournament is great and all this. But this is where I think the NCAA, and I'm going to bring this up to some coaches here, has got their own flaws too. Let's not make a mistake about this, okay? And I'm going to give you UCF as an example. UCF is receiving votes in the polls. They've beaten Florida, who's having a good year in the SEC. They were neck and neck with Memphis, who's a top 10 team in the country. They played Wisconsin, who's the top 25 team, 1-0 match. And yet, you look at the RPI, UCF's only ranked 91st. They're only 91 in the RPI. Yeah. And what hurts them is their strength of schedule, quote unquote, is only 217, which is just – and what's hurt them is a lot of teams they thought was going to be good, like Arizona State, for example, is in the hundreds in the RPI. Mm-hmm. How do you predict that?
The two California teams they play, they're struggling this year too, aren't they?
They're down. Yes, they're in the 150s, I believe, when I checked. The thing that's hurting them is that draw at George Mason. George Mason's in the 200s.
Yeah.
But this is my problem, Jeff, and this is a thing that it's interesting. Men's college basketball got rid of the RPI last year. They created this system called the net because they were not satisfied with the RPI. Yet these other sports maintain using the RPI, and I've seen UCF a lot in person. I saw them this week against Memphis, in particular in Tulsa. And I've seen them on TV against Florida. I've seen them again. The eye test, if you watch this team, they're not the 91st best team. They're closer to the 25th best team than the 91st. I actually think the coaches, the people that are voting, are more accurate in this case than the RPI numbers would suggest. And I think that's the flaw here, is you can't just base it on numbers because certain teams don't turn out to be as good as maybe we thought when you schedule them out of conference. This team is a good team. This is a top 30 team, but my concern is, Jeff, because of the numbers, and the committee will always just cower out to the numbers, and they'll say, well, they only have a 91 RPI. They may not give them the benefit of the doubt, and that's the flaw. There's flaws in every postseason system, and I just exposed it here in women's soccer. And you look at it, to me, Jeff, that's why, if you look at this Thursday, they're at number 22 SMU. Must win, in my opinion. Why? Because SMU's RPI is 41. I'm going to read you the rest of UCF's schedule. Ready for this? You might want to grab a paper bag here.
Okay.
So SMU's RPI is 41. That's on Thursday. They're ranked in the top 25.
Right.
They go to Houston. Houston's RPI 235.
Ugh.
They host Temple then on the 16th. Their RPI 213.
Not good.
UConn 168. At
Still
East
not
Carolina,
good.
167.
Yeah, that's the soft spot. This is the soft spot of the schedule, right?
Cincinnati, 155. They close on Halloween night against South Florida, who's 26. You brought this up 2 episodes ago. And the American is down this year. You mentioned it when you first saw those RPI numbers. That was your initial instincts.
Yeah, it's very top heavy.
very top heavy. They're only ranked 9th this year in the conference. That's my concern with women's soccer. I think they almost have to win out in the regular season to put themselves in position to be an at-large. And that would include wins over SMU and South Florida, which are quality wins. I do.
And they would need probably to win 1 or 2 more in the tournament too, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, who knows? Probably, depending on what the numbers are. So I think this is a big match for the women's team because I think they're better than that, and that's why I think it'll be interesting to me when the other sports follow men's basketball and say, you know what, this RPI is flawed, and go with a different system. But this is a big match for them. But I think Coach Schneid likes how their team is playing, and she likes the depth that they have, and that's going to pay off for them because they should have more depth than just about everybody on the schedule, maybe except USF. That's going to be a big match. But this is a big match on Thursday against SMU. They've got to get a result here, Jeffrey, because unfortunately, as I just read to you, they only have 2 matches where they can get a quality RPI games. So you have to me, they have to win out because you want to avoid losing to Houston, Temple, all those teams. You can't afford a loss.
Right. Because a loss will kill you much more than a win would. I mean,
absolutely.
And it seems kind of weird that they're not getting any credit for the victories that they had also earlier in the season because usually you see that when you get a big win, the RPI bumps you up, but it doesn't seem like that. Like the victory over even just playing Memphis would bump you up in terms of your RPI, but they don't seem to have gotten enough of a boost at least to this point.
Not been friendly at all. 5 of the 10 matches are against teams 150 or worse in the RPI. I mean, how do you predict that though? Ohio State was a team that was a top 4 Big Ten team. Their RPI is 118. You can't predict that, Jeff. You can't.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do?
That's true, but. You sound like a football fan.
But that's my point. Every sport has this problem.
Right. So we're going to have to see. Here's the part that's a little scary for me, though, is that, we mentioned this soft spot in the schedule after SMU, but 4 of their next 6 are on the road. So you're playing some teams that are kind of in that soft spot, but it's never easy on the road. It just isn't. So this is the Texas road trip coming up this weekend. The following weekend, they're home for UConn and Temple. Thank goodness they don't have to go up there where it's going to be cold. And then Thursday, Sunday, the 24th and 27th, at ECU and then at Cincinnati. The Cincinnati game, late October, that could be a pretty cold game too. Before they finish Halloween night at home against South Florida. When you look at the standings in the American, at least as of right this second here in women's soccer, Memphis and Cincinnati are 2-0 in the league, even though Cincinnati is 4-5-2 overall, and UCF is in a 3-way tie with South Florida and ECU. So in terms of getting that all important hosting, I think that that might have been that win against Memphis might have been UCF's best chance. To secure hosting, because now you got to hope Memphis loses twice. I don't know if they have 2 losses.
I don't see that happening. I mean, Memphis has SMU on the schedule, but outside of that, they're going to be heavy favorites. They're really good. I watched them in person on that third. They're really good. This might be his best team, and he's had some great teams at Memphis over the years, going back to Conference USA. This might be his best team. They're really good. That was a good match that Thursday night. You know how big it was, by the way? Our own Brian Murphy was there as well.
That's right. Murph was there, taking in a little UCF women's soccer
Jeremy
action.
Brenner made a cameo. I mean, it was big.
Brenner was there, yeah.
So who's who, and the Orlando Pride were there. But yeah, so I'm very concerned because I think this team, eye test wise, is a top 30, top 35 team, but the stats don't say that. So they gotta go on a roll here and get themselves in the mix, in my opinion.
They got to prove it. And they're going to get a chance to prove it against a ranked team. By the way, SMU has not played a conference match so far this season, which is kind of a surprise.
Yeah, it's kind of odd, ain't it?
Yeah, so weird how the schedule works out. So big weekend coming up for UCF women's soccer. Big weekends, by the way, for UCF volleyball. Here's where I really want UCF fans to pay attention now for volleyball, okay? Knights won their first 2 conference matches at home against the Northeastern teams, UConn and Temple, swept them both ways. And worked out some kinks, I thought, in those matches, in particular the Temple match, where Temple's probably going to be an improved team, but they're just not there yet. But UCF was able to, even though Temple was first 20 in the third set, UCF was able to do something that they had some trouble with early in the season, as we know, and close them out. 20. I believe Temple was the first to 20 in the third, and then UCF scored. I think it was 8 of the final 11 to finish it out. McKenna Melville with 18 kills against Temple. Anne-Marie Watson with 13, and Anne-Marie Watson is really emerging this season. I think. I mean, obviously she's been there for a while, but she has stepped up her game to a completely different level on the right side. And McKenna Melville is just McKenna Melville. She also had 15 kills against UConn in the early match, the conference opener, as UCF. I really dominated UConn, held them to 0-53 hitting while hitting 411 of their own. But the Temple match, I think, on Sunday was really the big one because Temple kind of gave UCF a little bit of a ride there in the third set, and the Knights looked like they didn't quite have their best game that day, but it was good enough, especially down the stretch when they needed it, to get the victory. And I talked about it with Coach Dagenet afterwards. The situation involving late game matchups and late game situations, and he said he was pretty encouraged by what he saw from UCF late on Sunday.
Really, it came down to our serving game. I thought we were able to take them out of their rhythm, out of their system, made them a little bit more predictable, which allowed us. We didn't get as many blocks as what we normally do. But that's because they're more of a chip and roll, and they don't let you block them. They don't want to make that mistake. But our serve limited some of their options, and so we were able to get 3 blockers on 2 hitters. And we didn't get a lot of blocks, but we got a lot of really good touches that we were able to then turn around and convert quickly into points. So I really think that's what happened at the end, is we were just able to convert some points because of good serving.
So the ledger there, that's Coach Dagenet Todd Dagenet from UCF Volleyball. So the ledger right now for UCF is 9-5. They've won 3 in a row, but now they head on the road. And I really want you UCF fans who might be traveling to Cincinnati to pay attention, because Friday night we know the football game's happening at 8:00, right, Eric?
Yep.
12 noon.
Correct.
12 noon at Fifth Third Arena in Cincinnati. UCF Volleyball plays the Bearcats as well. It's a tough road trip weekend. It's at Cincinnati, at ECU. They got to fly from Cincinnati to somewhere in North Carolina, Charlotte or Raleigh, and then bus over. But this matchup against Cincinnati is against the best player in the conference, hands down, and who Todd Dagenet said was the best player the conference has ever seen, Jordan Thompson. The Bearcats coming in, they are the major threat to UCF in the conference and in the division. Remember, they have divisions in volleyball right now. The Bearcats coming into this match are 10-4. They've knocked off the likes of Tennessee, who is ranked. They've knocked off Notre Dame. They've beaten Xavier, who's a pretty good team, and swept him. Went 5 with Louisville and lost, but won their first 2 conference matches, including that meat grinder at Wichita State. That's always a tough place to play. But here comes UCF and Jordan Thompson, who again is just having another magnificent year. She's got 298 kills already on 662 swings. Obviously, that leads the conference. She's going to be on the United States Olympic team, or at least we hope, or at least she should be. The most talented player that we've seen in her redshirt senior year. 6'4" outside hitter. I mean, she's got all the tools, man, and she's going to be a tough matchup for UCF. And that's where, having her on the outside, that's where, Anne-Marie Watson and Catherine Westlich were her kryptonite last year in 2 matches that UCF won in 5 sets. Man, this is just going to be huge. And I hope that there's plenty of UCF in the stands for volleyball on noon on Friday. If you're getting up there to Cincinnati for the game, make sure you get up there early enough to see UCF volleyball, right?
What do you think about that noon start? Why not a little, I'm sure facilities maybe had a hand on, why not have it like 2 or 3 o'clock, a little closer to the kickoff or football game? Because I guess they feel that if by doing it at noon, you can maybe get people there before tailgating, I guess, really kicks in. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting, complete opposite, tricky doubleheader. But, yeah, it should be great. I mean, that's the 2 best teams volleyball-wise. Huge match. They played 2 classic 5-setters last year, 5-set matches, both won by UCF, which propelled them to win the league. I think everybody would agree they're the 2 best teams in the league, and yet you mentioned it because of the changes this year with the conference tournament being added and going into 2 divisions. One of these teams, more than likely, UCF or Cincinnati, whoever doesn't win their division, and for those that don't know, basically think about the football divisions and apply it to volleyball. It's the same thing, with the difference being that Wichita State is in the West like Navy would be in football. So whoever doesn't win the Eastern Division, either UCF or Cincinnati, is going to have to play an extra match in the quarterfinals in the conference tournament here in UCF in November. So whereas the team that wins the division gets a bye into the semifinals. So that is a huge stakes for both teams. And I think it's a must-win for Cincinnati, Jeffrey, because they're at home.
Yeah.
They lost to UCF twice last year. So I wonder if they were to lose again to UCF, that would be 3 in a row, and you would have to come down to Orlando to try to beat them for the regular season title. That's going to be tough, maybe psychologically, for Cincinnati to handle. So, it's going to be fascinating. I can't wait. Should be an exciting match. Thompson, you mentioned, I remember I called her freshman year. I called the match for the American Digital Network with Aaron Campbell. It was her freshman year. Cincinnati beat UCF, and I'll never forget, Aaron Campbell, you know very well, is a friend of the show, told me right there at that moment, just watching it for the first time, that's a future U.S. Olympian. She's an All-American legit. Right there. And she's been proven correct. She's a phenomenal player, and it's been great for the league, and I think it's helped raise the league a little bit too, because she's brought a lot of attention to the league. So, and yet, you could maybe a passing of the torch this year, Jeffrey. Could we see a passing of the torch from Thompson to someone like McKenna Melville, who I think is phenomenal?
Quite possibly, because McKenna, remember, she got some international experience as well over the summer. Anne-Marie Watson also tried out for that collegiate national team. She didn't make it, but she still got to go to the camp and play against that competition, and I think that really helped out her development as well tremendously this year. We might see a passing of the torch. Now, bear in mind, these 2 teams do play again, like you mentioned, Eric, on November 10th at UCF. Because they're in the division, you play your divisional opponents twice. And that, by the way, would be senior day for UCF. That's the regular season finale.
Really?
So, yeah, what an opponent to bring in on the last regular season matchup.
Could have everything on the line still by that point.
Exactly. Even though UCF does have 2 matches right after that, at Temple and at UConn, in mid-November before the Knights host the conference championship. But still, this is going to be a big if you can get that tally up in their joint, that's going to not just help your confidence, that helps your standings because you get them one more time at home, and it's also going to really help out UCF's RPI as well. They haven't released the RPI yet for volleyball, but if UCF can get that W up there, that would be a big boost to UCF's postseason prospects. Now, I don't want to look too far ahead because ECU is also coming up, and that game is going to be, or that match is going to be tough enough. ECU right now, as we look at the standings, by the way, ECU is in the division. They're 12-3 overall, but they started off the conference season 0-2. So they're off to a bit of a rough start. Cincinnati's at 10-4, 2-0.
On the road, they lost a couple matches on the road. Keep in mind, UCF last conference loss was in 2017 at East Carolina.
Yeah, that's true. So, and that's, I think, 25 consecutive conference matches in a row that UCF has won right now.
26 overall now, and then 25 or 26 overall, and then 15 in a row quietly in the venue conference wins.
That's right. So, but this one's not in the venue. This is on the road. It's going to be the toughest test yet against a Cincinnati team that knows how close they came twice last year in those 2 matches, and thinks that they
two teams that a lot of people believe will be an NCAA tournament field. I mean, if you had to kind of project, they are the 2 teams from the American. Although Tulane may have something to say about that, they might be the best team out west. They could be maybe the surprise. Maybe they're the team that pushes UCF and Cincinnati, or maybe it's somebody else. But I think head toe to toe, these are the 2 most talented teams, the 2 best teams in the league going in.
Right. So, huge match, and if you are planning on stopping by volleyball, remember noon Eastern start for that match between UCF and Cincinnati, and Fifth Third Arena where they play. If you've never been to Cincinnati's campus, the arena is right next to Nippert Stadium, the football stadium. So you wouldn't have to leave to, catch some volleyball.
Are you sure that's noon Eastern? I think or it's not noon Central.
I'm looking at the UCF schedule on the website, and that is and they list everything on Eastern time there. So it says noon Eastern. I'm just gonna double check the Cincinnati schedule real quick just to see what they have there, because if it says 11 a.m. it says 12 noon on Cincinnati site. So
yeah, noon. Yeah.
Okay.
What time zone are we in Cincinnati, y'all?
Yeah. Eastern.
Whatever it is, noon in Cincinnati.
I thought Cincinnati was in the Central time zone, right? I can't believe I don't.
On this podcast. Actually, you know what? We're dumb. We're dumb, Jeff. They're Eastern time zone.
Oh, they are Eastern time zone? Okay, they are in the Eastern time zone. They must be right on the edge of it, man, because I'm I'm kind of a little surprised. I thought they were in Central time, but they are in Eastern time.
Right. Yeah, Ohio is one of those weird states, right, where certain parts are Central, certain are Eastern.
Right. So
noon Eastern, noon people.
Noon Eastern time. So, and they're right next to Indiana, which is in Central time. So, but anyway, so that'll settle that. So let's finish up by looking at what we have coming up this week. Obviously, Eric, you've got the TV ratings up there for UCF. You've got a look also at the 3 stars. Yep. And Murph has his checklists that he's been doing. It's a pretty busy week, man. We are eyeball deep into it, man. All of a sudden, here we are in the month of October, right?
It's huge. You know it's big when Murph's just skipping a show because he's got a lot on his plate. This is a big
too
week.
Busy.
He's got a short week. It's a ton of things going on, but he's going to have his articles up there as well. He's going to be up in Cincinnati.
Shows you where we are on Murph's priority list, And
rightfully so, probably. He'll be up in Cincinnati up there, obviously, so follow him on Twitter throughout the football game. And then, we're going to be following. Obviously, we're going to be watching that game as well. We'll be social media. Probably a Friday night shift edition there. Are we going to do you guys going to do a late night?
I'm planning on it. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can. I'm hoping that we can do it if you're up for staying up that late. I know that the Australian Open is not on, so I don't know how that affects your ability to stay.
No, but there's a late Dodger baseball playoff game, so that'll probably keep me up as well as after the football game. So we got that going on. We mentioned all the big sporting events going on at UCF this week on the road. It's huge. I mean, this is a huge landmark judgment week for all the teams and where they stand moving forward. This is big. I mean, this is one of the bigger weeks that I can remember where every team, you normally don't see this, every team has a monster big conference matchups. And it's not just coaches talk, it's legit. Where everybody has a top 20, you got volleyball in a showdown against the 1 versus 2 arguably in volleyball. Men's soccer is a top 10, top 15 matchup in the country. Women's soccer is playing a top 25 team, and football is playing arguably their biggest threat in their division. So it's an incredible week of UCF athletics.
And you can follow it with us right here on blackandgoldbanneret.com, SB Nation's home.
The only people that follow everything. We're the only ones that follow everything UCF. We're not a one. We follow every sport, every coach. This is the show that coaches listen to, tune into the play. This is where everybody tunes into.
That's right. And you can follow us also at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Follow us each individually at Jeff_Sharon and Eric Lopez Elo. Don't forget also, we're going to have, you can get all the latest from Luke Saris at Luke Saris SBN. He's got his, he takes email questions as well and listens to those. Don't forget Jeremy Brenner and myself, and hopefully you too, Eric Lopez, will be joining us for Night Shift after the Cincinnati game, probably immediately following the final gun. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel and our Twitter feed for updates.
Who knows what time that'll be?
I know. We might be. People might be upset about
brother.
how
it could be midnight.
Yeah. And we've got a lot more also coming from all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret. So for Eric Lopez. And also I want to thank as well Mike Schneid from Down the Drive. Make sure you follow him at Down the Drive and MS Schneid on Twitter. And thanks again to him for the insight on Cincinnati. They're good people over there, so make sure you give them a holler and and thank them for their work as well and helping us understand Cincinnati a little bit better. Heading into Friday night, 8 o'clock, big kickoff for UCF on national TV in a huge matchup in the division. We'll have all that coverage for you coming in the next couple days. For Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will catch you on night shift after UCF and Cincinnati on Friday night. See you then.